There were scathing criticisms of law enforcement response from both the school district and the community there, plus state resources that were directed to Uvalde to respond to this attack that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Another criticism that came was directed at the school district. They talked about lapses in security. I think it was the words were used, a culture of complacency at the school itself.
Welcome to Verdict Vantage, covering breaking news stories. Thank you for supporting our research. We would like to extend a trigger warning before we continue. Please be advised.
This video contains discussions about true crime, which may include topics such as violence, assault, and other distressing incidents. Viewer discretion is advised.
Just in. CBS News reports. DOJ's Uvalde report finds unimaginable failure in school shooting response. The article reads: a federal report investigating the police response to the May 2022 shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, found multiple failures by officers that allowed the attack to continue even as police were at the school. The report, conducted by the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Community-Oriented Policing, known as the COPS Office, looked at thousands of pieces of data and documentation and more than 260 interviews, including with law enforcement and school personnel, family members of victims, and witnesses and survivors from the massacre. The team investigating visited Uvalde 9 times, spending 54 days on the ground in the small community. In a press conference after the release of the report, Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta said the law enforcement response was an unimaginable failure, and a lack of action by adults failed to protect children and their teachers. In the report, much of the blame was placed on former police chief of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District, who was terminated in the wake of the shooting, although the report also said that some officers' actions may have been influenced by policy and training deficiencies.
Our first look at the Department of Justice's findings of its nearly year-and-a-half-long investigation into the horrific mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas back in 2022. According to the report, poor coordination, training, and execution of active shooter protocol contributed to a law enforcement response that it describes as a, quote, failure.
It goes on to say, quote, the most significant failure was that responding officers should have immediately recognized the incident as an active shooter situation, using the resources and equipment that were sufficient to push forward immediately and continuously toward the threat until entry was made into classrooms 111 and 112, and the threat was eliminated.
For more, we are joined by NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky, who is in Uvalde. So, Morgan, what else can you tell us about this report?
And Josephina, this is more than 600 pages, essentially going through not just minute by minute of the shooting itself, but circumstances that led up to the shooting that could have impacted that response, and then mistakes also made in the aftermath of the shooting, whether it be treatment for the victims or for those here in the surrounding community. You already mentioned some of the most glaring mistakes that were mentioned by the Justice Department in this report. What essentially it's explaining to the folks here in Uvalde, Joe and Savannah, is it's not so much this is brand new information. Unfortunately, this just further confirms their deepest fears all along, and that is, from start to finish, there was a breakdown in communication that led to an
The report from
failure,
CBS News gives us insight into the key details on officials' poor response on arrival to the crime scene. The report found that police were on the scene within minutes of the attack being reported, and 11 officers went into the school 3 minutes after arriving on the scene. 5 went toward the classroom, but all of the officers retreated for cover after initial shots. After 3 attempts to approach the classrooms where 19 students and 2 teachers were killed, the focus shifted from stopping the shooter to evacuating other rooms, the report said. The report found there is a great deal of confusion, miscommunication, a lack of urgency, and a lack of incident command at this time. The report referred to this response as a critical failure, stating that several officers acted consistently with accepted practices before retreating after hearing gunfire. Police also focused more on additional SWAT tactical officers arriving, a strategy that the report said should not delay a response. Since the Columbine school shooting, a fundamental precept of active shooter response must be to immediately neutralize the subject, according to the report. 48 minutes after officers first entered the school, there were 4 more shots fired. No one entered the classrooms, presuming that the doors were locked. These gunshots should have spurred greater urgency to confront the suspect, the report said, rather than marked a retreat. Another 15 minutes passed with officers waiting for a sniper, who could not see into the building.
We do know that there were specific examples given, such as prior training for active shooters that mistakenly suggested that it could quickly devolve into a hostage situation, which is not the case. And they believe that that may have led authorities to react the way in which they did on May 24th, 2022. They also talked about poor communication with multiple rooms in Robb Elementary School being checked not once but twice because they were not clearly labeled if they were cleared or evacuated or not, wasting time. And they talked about people who evacuated out of Robb Elementary School being sheltered at a nearby funeral home, and not everyone was adequately medically screened. They mentioned a young child there who was bleeding for hours before receiving proper treatment.
The report stated that Uvalde Police Department Acting Chief Mariano Pargas, who has since resigned from his position, was in the best position to start taking command and control and start coordinating with approaching personnel. But Arredondo wound up in charge of the scene. Arredondo has previously said he did not know he was in charge of the scene. Arredondo discarded radios, causing communication difficulties, the report said, and leadership at the scene did not establish command posts, so arriving personnel did not receive accurate updates. Due to a lack of urgency outside and inaccurate information being shared, arriving officers thought that the shooter was dead or that Arredondo was inside the room with the suspect, the report said. The shooter was repeatedly described as barricaded and contained by officers. The most significant failure was that responding officers should have immediately recognized the incident as an active shooter situation, the report said. At no point did Pargas provide direction to personnel, the report said, despite being in the best position to start taking command and control and coordinate with arriving personnel. Pargas was told at one point that the room is full of victims, according to the report, and called dispatch to see if there were enough emergency medical responders on standby. Street closures blocked the arrival of ambulances, the report found. The vast majority of those on the scene had never trained together, according to the report, and there were policy and training deficiencies in play. Some first responders had never received any active shooter training, the report said. The report also found that Arredondo directed officers to delay making entry into the classrooms where the shooter was, in favor of getting keys and evacuating other classrooms in the building. There were 587 other students in the school that day, police said. Unfortunately, on multiple occasions, Arredondo directed officers intending to gain entry to classrooms to stop because he appeared to determine that other victims should first be removed from nearby classrooms, the report said. The report also criticized other agency leads for not effectively questioning the judgment displayed by Pargas and Arredondo.
But Savannah, perhaps one of the most heartbreaking examples that this report puts forth is that there was a horrible mistake made in how the loss of life was shared with immediate family, sharing that some parents were told their child had survived when in fact they had not.
Morgan, just heartbreaking to hear some of these details. We know a lot of this had already been picked over, as you referenced. We've heard a lot about this, but now that we have this, where do we go from here? I mean, we know already several of the officers involved already lost their jobs, including some named in this report. Are we expecting to see any more consequences?
Well, there are certainly members of the community that would like to see additional accountability. We do know that Attorney General Merrick Garland will be having a press conference here at 11 o'clock local time in Uvalde. That will be followed by a press conference with representatives from victim families, where we anticipate hearing what they would like to do going forward. We do know a number of them have become very much fierce advocates for both improving school safety and changing gun policy. But it will be very interesting to see, in light of this recent report, if there's anything specific that they're looking to. I can tell you, having spoken to a family member of a victim last night, that they are still holding out for charges to be held against some of these officers that they watched on body cam wait minute by precious minute before moving in and fatally engaging that gunman.
The report found that the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District did not have an active shooter policy, but did have a policy specifically related to incident command roles and responsibilities. This outlined that the district police department chief should be the person in control of the scene, should secure the administration office as a command post if possible and designate an alternate post if not, and work to communicate with other responding officers. According to this policy, Arredondo was the de facto incident commander. It wasn't until 12:17 p.m., about 45 minutes after officers arrived on the scene, that Pargas assigned an officer to establish a command post, the report found. Leadership from various responding agencies demonstrated no urgency for establishing a command and control structure, which led to challenges related to information sharing, lack of situational statuses, and limited to no direction for personnel in the hallway or on the perimeter. 27 minutes after the second round of gunshots and 75 minutes after officers first entered the building, the classroom doors were opened, the report said, and 2 minutes later, police entered the classroom. Responding officers included members of the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Unit, and deputies from Uvalde and Zavala counties. The shooter fired 45 rounds in the presence of officers before being killed, the report said. One of the members of the Border Patrol Tactical Unit was injured.
Has released its report on the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde that claimed the lives of 19 students and 2 adults, and they're calling the police response a, quote, failure. The report details critical failures and other breakdowns prior to, during, and after that shooting. Now, this report goes on to say the most significant failure was that responding officers should have immediately recognized the incident as an active shooter situation, using the resources and equipment that were sufficient to push forward immediately and continuously toward the threat while entry was made into the classroom, and that threat was eliminated. The investigation also revealed that a student called 911 at 12:12 p.m. and told the dispatcher there were 8 or 9 still alive, and that the information was shared broadly across the radio channel.
I also told the families and survivors how deeply sorry I am for the losses they suffered that day and for the losses they have suffered every day since. I told them that the priority for the Justice Department in preparing this report has been to honor the memories of those who were taken from them. And I told the families gathered last night what I hope is clear among the hundreds of pages and thousands of details in this report. Their loved ones deserve better.
The DOJ also concluded that no one assumed a leadership role to direct the response towards the active shooter, including Police Chief Pete Arredondo, who was on scene. Now, following the evacuation of the school, the report says several injured students were directed to buses and transported to the Civic Center without the knowledge of the medics on scene. What were some of the other failures that were detailed in this nearly 500-page report?
There were scathing criticisms of law enforcement response from both the school district and the community there, plus state resources that were directed to Uvalde to respond to this attack that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Another criticism that came was directed at the school district. They talked about, lapses in security. I think it was, the words were used, a culture of complacency at the school itself, leaving doors unlocked and allowing people to come into the building that were not supposed to be there, but they were. So I think there are a lot of these criticisms that are going to be parsed through very closely now, not only by law enforcement, but the victims' families. They're calling for a lot of answers too. The Department of Justice said today is that they want these 273 recommendations to kind of provide a blueprint for other schools, other places, other law enforcement agencies across the country to respond to potentially other mass shooting incidents and what to do when those happen. They shared a stark warning. They said there's a pattern of these mass shootings happening. There's no sign that's going to stop anytime soon, so they hope they heed these recommendations. One in particular is that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, recommended 2 trainings in particular. It's not really that much of a surprise, but those in particular are active shooter response training for law enforcement. So again, going toward a threat, toward a shooter if one is happening, and also critical incident command training. You mentioned there that nobody was in charge that day of directing resources to different places. So they hope that law enforcement agencies will listen to that and make some changes in response. I would say namely is that they want criminal prosecution to happen. This report laid out incredible, sweeping failures on law enforcement's behalf. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, said that, it is not, that this particular tragedy did not happen under federal jurisdiction. Again, directing it to the district attorney there in Uvalde. The families today talked and said, I hope that she is paying attention to this report and that there might be some criminal prosecution out of that. The district attorney there has been very close-lipped about the investigation into this and to what's coming out now. So we, of course, await her response and have to just, again, wait and see if there's any kind of criminal prosecution brought from this. But again, that fire is building. These families calling for that specifically.
Verdict Vantage, thanks you for tuning in. Your support means the world to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and hit the subscribe button to join our amazing community. Stay in the loop on future updates by ringing the notification bell. And if you found this valuable, sharing is caring. Thanks again for being here.